just wanna walk with you, Lord. Walk with you and talk with you every day.
Shabbat Shalom. Today's date is October 21st. I want to welcome everybody out there in YouTube land who will be hearing this message there soon. Thank you for joining in. Today we're going to talk about what is the curse of Canaan. And this is one of those things where we've heard lots of theories out there about it. Just to kind of get into it, what are some theories we've heard, for example? Sister Merlene, what would you say? What's one of the theories you've heard about the curse of Canaan?
I heard that because Cain did not present the right kind of offering to the Father, that he was cursed with black skin.
Interesting, right? I've heard that one too before. That's right. Yep, that's right. They said that Cain was cursed with black skin because he didn't give a correct offering to the Most High, and in some kind of way that translated to the curse of Canaan. Interesting, right? What about you, Craig? Okay, boys. All right. So one of the things I've heard in everything has been that something similar along those lines, that Canaan was cursed, and so therefore, because he was cursed, that black people were cursed with black skin, and that's the reason why black people went into slavery and all those kind of things like that. But one of the interesting things that when you start to research these different beliefs about the curse of Canaan is that a lot of times they're produced by someone who has an alternate agenda to actually promote a certain idea or belief. And so when you think about that, that means there's some type of maybe, what's the right word to say? Some type of emotional attachment maybe they have to a certain belief. And so because of that, it causes them to actually produce something that's actually not true. And of course, we know when reading the Bible, a lot of times sometimes we can feel a certain way about something or believe a certain way or we've heard a certain way, but then it can be something that we base our belief according to emotion and not according to facts, not according to actually what's true, what's written. And we have to be very careful about that because these things produce what's called irrational beliefs. And so I want to look up that word irrational for a moment, and I'm looking it up from dictionary.com, and it says, without the faculty of reason, deprived of reason, without normal mental clarity or sound judgment. It's illogical. It's simply not endowed with the faculty of reason. So that means if it's irrational, then that means it's something that's not carefully thought out. So for example, if it's irrational, someone is not really taking the time out to really think it through, to see if it actually reasons correctly. And we have to be very careful about those things because that's how we have so many different beliefs today that are just so far out there, that are so far left field. And this is why we have to be careful about false prophets and false teachers. And that's one of those things that we mentioned last week as well. And that's why I'm so careful about that because, false teachers are everywhere. So there's two elements to the actual curse of Canaan that we want to look at today. There's only two elements to it completely. And we're going to look at those issues. So the first thing is nakedness. Now, before we get into what nakedness is, let's go to the book of Genesis, chapter 9. That's the book of Genesis, chapter 9. And we're going to read verses 18 through 27. So Genesis chapter 9, and we're going to start at verse 18. Now, of course, in this chapter, it's talking about what happened after Noah and his sons got off the ark. So in verse 18, it says, and the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, and Ham, and Japheth. And Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine, and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment, and laid it upon both their shoulders, and went backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. And God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. So, there's a couple things we have to look at. Now, we're going to define here what nakedness is. So let's go back up to verse 22. And we're going to look up the word nakedness there. And it's important that we do these things in order to actually make sure it's clear what is being talked about here. So the word for nakedness there is Hebrews 61:72. And it means nudity, shame. It implies shameful exposure, or something that's improper, indecent, or something exposed. That's the definition we want to look at here. What was it that was actually exposed? Well, he didn't have any clothing on. So that's why it was said that he was naked. Or that's why it said he had nakedness. Now, what was it that Ham exactly did? Now, I'll tell you, this is one of those things that kind of, because I've heard different theories that say, well, Ham did something perverted with his father. But when we define the terms, that's actually not given to us here in the scriptures. It just says that he was uncovered in his tent, and Ham, in verse 22, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. So, from the context of what's here, the only thing we know is that Ham saw his father naked. But it's what he did, which is actually what we're going to get into. When he saw his father's nakedness, he went out and told Shem and Japheth. Then we look at what Shem and Japheth did in verse 23. What did they do that was different from Ham? Well, they took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and they went backwards so that they wouldn't see their father's nakedness. Now, let's bring it in today's time. It's possible that we could walk in a place and someone could be there in that place and they could be exposed, they could be naked. But generally a person who is mannerable, respectful, as soon as they enter into the place and they have a glimpse of that, they immediately turn their eyes. They immediately turn around because they don't want to disrespect the person. They don't want to see the person's nakedness. That's a matter of respect, correct? But would they go out and then tell everybody else, hey, guess what? Someone else is naked in there. Because then that's when we're getting into something sinful. Because when someone's naked, essentially they're in a vulnerable state. Will we not say? They're vulnerable. They're naked. They're uncovered. And we know there's scriptures that talk about we should cover one another in the New Testament. And it's talking about more than just from a physical semblance. It's talking about also when we see each other's faults. We should cover one another in our faults, right? We should, as the Bible says, we should go and establish those who we see overtaken in a fault even to bring them back into covenant. But Ham saw the nakedness of his father, and he went out and told his brethren instead. But his brothers took a garment and actually covered their father Noah. So in verse 25, Noah pronounces a curse upon Canaan. Now this is another thing where we have to actually talk about for a moment, because in people's theories about the curse of Canaan, I've heard them say that it's actually because he cursed Canaan, that he essentially cursed Ham. But no, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible tells us that Ham had multiple sons. It said only cursed be Canaan. It didn't say cursed be Phut or cursed be Mizraim. It said cursed be Canaan. It didn't say cursed be Cush. So this tells us, right, that when we dispel the lies from the truth, there was only one son of Ham that was cursed. That was Canaan. Was Ham himself cursed? No. The Bible simply doesn't tell us that. So when we hear these doctrines out there that talk about, well, Ham was cursed, and so therefore all black people were cursed, well, you're talking about then a third of all mankind. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, cursed be Canaan. But what does it mean when it says cursed? Let's actually define that in verse 25. That's Hebrew 779. And it says to be cursed. It says to execrate. We go and actually define it in the lexicon. It says to abhor, to detest. It says also that it's a kind of enchantment that is supposed to render days unfortunate by their imprecations. Now, let's define also what it means to be cursed from the dictionary. So again, I'm going to go to dictionary.com, and it says it's the expression of a wish that misfortune, ill, or doom shall befall a person. They call it even a formula or a charm that's intended to cause misfortune to another. The act of reciting such a formula or to bring misfortune upon someone. But we're going to see a little bit more about this here in just a little bit as well. So when we talk about nakedness, like I said, we define the term there. It means someone naked. And the thing is, we can see that what Ham did was different than what his actual brothers, Shem and Japheth, did. Well, let's get a little more about that. Let's go to the book of Leviticus chapter 18. That's the book of Leviticus chapter 18. And we're going to read verses 6 and 7. Chapter 18 of Leviticus, verse 6. None of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him to uncover their nakedness. I am the Most High. The nakedness of thy father or the nakedness of thy mother shalt thou not uncover. She is thy mother. Thou shalt not uncover her nakedness. Now I know that someone listening to this will say, well, brother, he's talking about having sex with your parents. And I won't disagree. But still, there's something about nakedness here. And the thing is about nakedness is still it implies someone who is actually naked also in appearance. When we look at what Ham did, obviously what Ham did was something that was evil, that was not actually good. What his brothers did was actually good. How do we know this? Because Noah then pronounced a blessing on Shem and Japheth right after they took a garment on their backs and went backwards and covered their father. So essentially, they were looking out. It was almost like if we were to break it down today, when we say to someone, hey, why don't you cover me? Or for example, if someone's in a gunfight, they'll tell someone else is with them, cover me, right? So there's saying, watch out for me. Don't let me be exposed. Don't let my vulnerabilities be shown. Ham let his father's vulnerability be shown. His brothers did not. So this is one aspect of the curse of Canaan. But there is also another aspect too that's actually written, that actually has been taken out of the actual canonized Bible, but still we have the record of it in the book of Jasher and the book of Jubilees. So we're going to look at that also, because what we're going to find is Canaan was doubly cursed in two ways. One, in the way that he did in Genesis chapter 9, but also something else he did that's not mentioned in Genesis quite. So we're going to have to take a look at the second issue by going into the table of nations. So let's go to now the book of Genesis chapter 10. That's the book of Genesis chapter 10. We're going to read verses 21 through 25. That's the book of Genesis chapter 10, verses 21 through 25. So verse 21 says, Unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder, even to him were children born. The children of Shem, Elam, and Ashur, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. And the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash. And Arphaxad begot Selah, and Selah begot Eber. And unto Eber were born two sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. Now, verse 25 is the one I want to key on for a second. It says that Eber had a son named Peleg, and it says that he was called that because in his days the earth was divided. Now let me ask you this. When we look at that, I know that I used to have an idea that came to my mind when I looked at about the earth being divided. And I thought it was divided in the sense that everyone who was alive at that point beginning to scatter themselves. But that's only partially true. Did you know that there was a literal dividing, that the children actually literally decided where each were going to actually reside? That's the thing, we're not exactly told that explicitly in Genesis, but still it's implied in verse 25 here. So at that time the earth was divided. But we're going to take a look further at how it was divided as well. For this we're going to need to go to the book of Jubilees. And everybody may not have a copy of Jubilees in here. But I'll put it up on the screen here so we can see it. This is one of the reasons why, even when they take away books out of the Bible, I like the fact that the Most High still made it available for us to be able to go and actually look at those books and still read them to get context and get further information or expansion on what Genesis had mentioned already. So we're going to go to the book of Jubilees, chapter 8. And bear with me just a moment there. We're going to read verses 1 through 9 of Jubilees chapter 8. Alright, bear with me just a moment there. I've just got to connect here to the screen here. And alright. Come on. Alright, here we go. So, Book of Jubilees, chapter 8. And we'll read verses, let's see here, 1 through 9. So it says, in the 29th Jubilee, in the first week, in the beginning thereof, Arphaxad took to himself a wife, and her name was Razuahah, the daughter of Susan, the daughter of Elam. And she bare him a son in the third year in this week, and he called his name Canaan. And the son grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place, and where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it, and sinned owing to it, for it contained the teaching of the watchers in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun, and the moon, and the stars, and all the signs of heaven. And he wrote down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. And in the 30th Jubilee, in the second week, in the first year thereof, he took to himself a wife, and her name was Melchah, the daughter of Madai, the son of Japhet. And in the 4th year he begot a son, and called his name Shelah, for he said, truly I have been sent. And in the 4th year he was born, and Shelah grew up, and took to himself a wife, and her name was Muach, the daughter of Kesed, his father's brother, in the 31st Jubilee, in the 5th week, in the first year thereof. And she bare him a son in the 5th year thereof, and he called his name Eber. And he took to himself a wife, and her name was Azurad, the daughter of Nebrod, in the 32nd Jubilee, in the 7th week, in the 3rd year thereof. And in the 6th year thereof she bare him a son, and he called his name Peleg, for in the days when he was born the children of Noah began to divide the earth amongst themselves. For this reason he is called Peleg. So again, that goes right back to Genesis, but it's telling you here, the children of Noah begin to actually divide it amongst themselves. So they begin to discuss it. Because verse 9 says, and they divided it secretly amongst themselves and told it to Noah. So it was later, after they divided it amongst themselves, that they actually went back and told it to Noah. Now, give me 1 second there. So, since they went and actually divided it amongst themselves at that point, they were going to go back and tell Noah, and then we're going to pick up from the rest of it there in verse 10, of the same chapter of Jubilees 8 and read down through 30. All right. So verse 10, and it came to pass in the beginning of the 33rd Jubilee that they divided the earth into 3 parts, for Shem and Ham and Japheth, according to the inheritance of each, in the first year of the first week. And when one of us had been sent, was with them. And he called his sons, and they drew nigh to him, and they and their children, and he divided the earth into the lots, which his 3 sons had to take in possession, and they reached forth their hands and took the writing out of the bosom of Noah their father. So it's telling us that at this point, this is during the time of Peleg in Genesis, they divided amongst themselves, they divided the lands, and then now they begin to cast lots for what piece of land that they would take. Verse 12, and there came forth on the writing as Shem's lot the middle of the earth, which he should take as an inheritance for himself and for his sons for the generations of eternity, from the middle of the mountain range of Rapha, from the mount of the water, from the river Tina, and his portion goes northwards towards the west through the midst of this river, and it extends till it reaches the water of the abysses, out of which this river goes forth and pours its waters into the sea Ma'at. And this river flows into the great sea, and all that is towards the north is Japheth's, and all that is towards the south belongs to Shem. And it extends till it reaches Karasul. This is the bosom of the tongue which looks towards the south. And this portion extends along the great sea, and it extends to the straight line till it reaches the west of the tongue, which looks towards the south. For this sea is named the tongue of the Egyptian sea. Now, why are we reading this? Because I'm going to show a map here in just a moment for us to actually see it all visually. Because reading it is kind of one thing, but then as you see it, it's a little bit better. So verse 15, and it turns from here towards the south, towards the mouth of the great sea on the shore of its waters, and it extends to the west to Afra, and it extends till it reaches the waters of the river Gihon, and to the south of the waters of Gihon, to the banks of this river. So I'm going to skip down to verse 17. This portion came forth by lot for Shem and his sons, and they should possess it forever unto his generations forevermore. So remember, the portions that go to each son are actually supposed to be for their children, them and their children to possess forever, for as long as the earth is here. Now, verse 18 says something specifically about this lot that went to Shem. It says, Noah rejoiced that this portion came to Shem and for his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy. For he has said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and may the Lord dwell in the dwelling of Shem. Now think about that, because we know that where did the Israelites dwell at? In the land of Canaan. And we're going to get to why it's called the land of Canaan. But it's described, that area here is described in this chapter, which we're going to read, as the middle of the earth. It actually describes that portion as the middle of the earth. But look at what Noah says in verse 19 here. He says, and he knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies, and the dwelling of the Most High, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. These 3 were created as holy places facing each other. That's interesting because, as we all know, none of us have access to the Garden of Eden anymore. But he said that was the Holy of Holies on the earth, where the Most High's presence actually dwelt. Verse 20, and he blessed the God of gods, who put forth the word of the Lord into his mouth, and the Lord forevermore. And he knew that a blessed portion and a blessing had come to Shem and his sons unto the generations forever. The whole land of Eden, the whole land of the Red Sea, the whole land of the east and India, and on the Red Sea and the mountains thereof, and all the land of Bashan, and the land of Lebanon, and the islands of Caphtor, and all the mountains of Sinir, and Ammana, and the mountains of Ashur in the north, and all the land of Elam, Ashur, and Babel. And just in case someone doesn't remember their geography, Babel is in the valley of Shinar, which is Mesopotamia, which is in modern-day eastern Iraq and western Iran. Verse 22. And for Ham came forth the second portion, beyond the Gihon towards the south to the right of the garden, and it extends toward the south, and it extends to all the mountains of fire, and it extends toward the west to the sea of Atel, towards the west till it reaches the sea of Muak, that sea into which everything which is not destroyed descends. We're going to skip on down to verse 24. And this is the land which came forth for Ham as the portion which he was to occupy forever for himself and his sons unto their generations forever. And then lastly, Japheth, verse 25. And for Japhet came forth the third portion toward the river Tena to the north of the outflow of its waters, and extends northeasterly to the whole region of Gog, to all the country east thereof, northerly to the north, and extends to the mountains of Quelt towards the north, towards the sea of Muak, and it goes forth to the east of Gedar, as far as the region of the waters of the sea. We're going to skip on down to verse 29. This is the land which came forth for Japhet and his sons as the portion of inheritance which he should possess for himself and his sons for their generations forever, 5 great islands, and a great land in the north. Verse 30, but it is cold. So Japhet's land will be cold. That gives us an idea of what people come from Japhet, right? Who lives in the cold regions? Europeans. The land of Ham is hot. Who lives in those hot regions? As they call them, Africans. And the land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, but is a blended cold and heat. So who are these people? A blended cold and heat? In the desert areas, in the northern part of Africa and the Middle East. Because why? During the day it's hot, and at night it is what? Cold. Blended cold and heat. So, someone may be thinking, well, brother, that's cool and all, but I thought we were talking about the curse of Canaan. We are. Well, we had to read that in order to actually get a little history, because when we get to the curse, the other part of the curse of Canaan, it's going to make sense. So, we're going to go to chapter 9 now of the book of Jubilees and read verses 1 through 15. This is going to be chapter 9, and we're going to read verses 1 through 15. Verse 1. And Ham divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Cush toward the east, and to the west of him for Mizraim, and to the west of him for Phut, and to the west of him, and to the west thereof on the sea for Canaan. And Shem also divided amongst his sons, and the first portion came forth for Ham and his sons to the east of the river Tigris, until it approaches the east, the whole land of India, the Red Sea on its coast, and the waters of Dedan, and all the mountains of Mibri and Elah, and all the land of Susan, and all that is on the side of Farnak, to the Red Sea, to the river Tena. Now, some of these rivers are obviously not in existence today. So that's the reason why we can't find some of these on the map. Some of them are in existence, but they've changed their names because languages have changed. Verse 3, and as for Ashur came forth the second portion, all the land of Ashur and Nineveh, and Shinar, and to the border of India, and it descends and skirts the river. So here's the thing. When you look at it, the fact of the matter is that all of Ham's descendants were not just supposed to get parts of Africa. Parts of them, we're going to see, was actually in the desert of where modern-day Saudi Arabia is. Part of it. Well, I'm going to show a map here to see it, though. Verse 4, and for Arphaxad came forth the third portion, all the land of the region of the Chaldees, to the east of the Euphrates, bordering the Red Sea, and all the waters of the desert close to the tongue of the sea, which looks toward Egypt, all the land of Lebanon and Sinir and Ammana to the border of Euphrates. And I'm going to skip down to verse 7. And Japhet also divided the land of his inheritance among his sons. The first portion came forth for Gomer to the east from the north side to the river Tena. The north there came forth from Magog and all the inner portions of the north until it reaches the sea of Meat. For Madai came his portion. Let's go down to 10. And for Javan came forth the fourth portion, every island and the islands which are towards the border of Lud. See, today we don't know what Lud is, but we can say for surety that Javan is the father of the Greeks. That we can say for sure. We have historical records of it. You can look in the concordance. It's everywhere. Verse 11, and for Tubal came forth the fifth portion in the midst of the tongue, which approaches towards the border of the portion of Lud to the second tongue. Verse 12, Meshach, the sixth portion. Let's skip down to 14. And thus the sons of Noah divided into his sons in the presence of Noah their father, and he bound them by an oath, imprecating a curse on everyone that sought to seize the portion which had not fallen to him by his lot. Now we notice here, it says Noah divided it amongst his sons, but he bound them by an oath, imprecating a curse on anyone who would decide to seize a piece of land that was not supposed to get to them. Verse 15, and they all said, so be it, and so be it. So they all agreed to this. For themselves and their sons forever throughout their generations till the day of judgment, on which the Lord God shall judge them with the sword and with fire for all the unclean wickedness of their errors, wherewith they have filled the earth with transgression and uncleanness and fornication and sin. So, this was something that all his sons actually agreed to actually do. Now, before we go further, what is an oath? I'm going to define it out of the dictionary. What is an oath? An oath it can be a solemn appeal to a deity or some revered person to witness someone's determination to speak the truth or to keep a promise. It's a contract, as Craig said. A statement or a promise strengthened by such an appeal. So an oath is something that's a promise. We already defined what curse was, but what does it mean to be accursed? Because they also mentioned that whoever didn't follow would be accursed. Someone who's accursed is someone who's already had a curse pronounced against them. That's all it means to be accursed. It just means someone who's already under a curse. So, let's get a little more now to see what actually happened in this commission. They had divided the land. It was during the time of Peleg, right? We know that Canaan was already cursed because of the fact that Ham, when he saw his father's nakedness, instead of covering his father, what he did was went and told his brothers. And then his brothers did the proper thing, which is to cover their father. Noah awake from his sleep. He realized what Ham did, and he cursed Ham's fourth son, Canaan. He didn't curse Ham. He cursed his son, Canaan. Not Mizraim, not Cush, not Phut, but Canaan. That's what the Bible says. Now, they agreed to the division of land, and they said they all agreed that whoever disobeyed it or tried to get some land that wasn't theirs will be cursed. Now, let's go back to the book of Jubilees, and we're going to read verses 18 through 27. That's Jubilees chapter 10, verses 18 through 27. Bear with me just a moment there. Technical difficulties here, everybody. All right. So we're in Jubilees chapter 10. I'm going to go down to verse 18. It says, in the 33rd Jubilee, in the first year, in the second week, Peleg took to himself a wife, whose name was Lomna, the daughter of Sinnar, and she bare him a son in the 4th year of this week, and called his name Ruth, for he said, behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar, in Mesopotamia. For they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar. What's the significance of Ararat again? Anyone remember? The ark, right. When the ark landed, that's where it landed at, Mount Ararat. And where is Mount Ararat today? In modern day Turkey. So it says in verse 19, for they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar, for in his days they built the city and the tower, saying, go to, let us ascend thereby into heaven. And they began to build, and in the 4th week they made brick with fire, and the bricks served them for stone, and the clay in which they submitted them together was asphalt, which comes from the sea and out of the fountains of water in the land of Shinar. So of course they're building they're building the Tower of Babel here. And bear with me just a second there. TV just went out on its own. So they're building a Tower of Babel here. And in verse 21 there it says it went up to 5,433 cubits. Now, does anyone know how long a cubit is? It's about 18 inches, a foot and a half. So if it was 5,433 cubits, how far is a mile? 5,280 feet. That means that that they have built this tower already to a mile and a half high up. That's something when you think about Because when we think about it at that time, we think about them being so primitive. But we forgot that the Watchers had brought all sorts of technology, which we read that one of the sons of Shem actually discovered the writings. So verse 22 of Jubilees 10, and the Most High God said unto us, behold, they are one people, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be withholden from them. Go down, let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech, and that they may be dispersed into cities and nations, and one purpose will no longer abide with them till the day of judgment. And why was this wrong? Because, of course, instead of actually going into the lands where they're supposed to go, they were actually staying together. When the Most High wanted us to fulfill the initial commission, which is mentioned back in the early part of Genesis, which is be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. So let's skip down to 24. And he confounded their language, and they no longer understood one another's speech, for they ceased then to build the city and the tower. For this reason the whole land of Shinar is called Babel, because the Lord did confound all the language of the children of men, and from thence they were dispersed into their cities, each according to his language and his nation. And the Lord sent a mighty wind against the tower, and overthrew it upon the earth, and behold, it was between Ashur and Babylon, in the land of Shinar, and they called its name Overthrow. Verse 27, in the 4th week of the 1st year, in the beginning thereof, the 34th Jubilee, were they dispersed from the land of Shinar. And we're going to keep reading. Verse 28. And Ham and his sons went into the land which he was to occupy, which he acquired as his portion in the land of the south. And Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Egypt, that it was very good. And he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west, that is, to the sea. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon eastward, and westward from the border of Jordan, and from the border of the sea. So we read about what they agreed to. They all agreed that, hey, if we don't follow this and we try to get land that is not ours, we're going to be cursed with a curse, correct? They all agreed to this in the presence of their father Noah. Canaan, though, comes along and he says, you know what? I don't really want that land over there, Dad. I want this land. He saw another piece of land and he said he wanted more. He said he looked to it and had the lust of the eyes, because that's really what happened. And he said, that land over there is better than this one. So that's what he went to go get. Verse 30. And Ham, his father, and Cush, and Mizraim, his brother, said unto him, Thou hast settled in a land which is not thine, and which did not fall to us by lot. Do not do so. For if thou dost do so, thou and thy sons will fall in the land, and be accursed through sedition. For by sedition ye have settled, and by sedition will thy children fall, and shalt thou be rooted out forever. So Ham and his other sons tell Canaan, hey, you can't do this. You're going to be accursed if you do this, under a curse. Verse 31, dwell not in the dwelling of Shem, for to Shem and his sons did it come by their lot. Cursed art thou, and cursed shalt thou be beyond all the sons of Noah, by the curse by which we bound ourselves by an oath in the presence of the holy judge, and in the presence of Noah, our father. So these are serious things that they're telling him. Canaan, don't do this, man. You're going to be cursed. You actually agreed to this in the presence of the Most High and in the presence of Noah, our father. You're going to be accursed through sedition, and your children after you are going to be cursed with sedition. Now, what does it mean when it says sedition? Well, it means incitement or discontent or rebellion against the government. Any act, especially in speech or writing, promoting such discontent and rebellion, rebellious disorder, insurrection, mutiny, even treason. So that means that all these things were going to come upon Canaan, and this was going to be the result of this curse for actually going into a land which he was not supposed to go into. Verse 33, but he did not hearken unto them, and dwelt in the land of Lebanon, from Hamath to the entering of Egypt, he and his sons, unto this day. And for this reason, that land is named what? Canaan. So, one of the reasons, so Canaan, we can see then, was doubly cursed. Correct? Not only did Ham see the nakedness of his father and did not cover his father, which pronounced one curse on Canaan, but then after all the sons of Noah divided the lands of the earth during the time of Peleg, they agreed that they should all take the land which they were supposed to actually take. But Canaan was disobedient. And so he took the land of Canaan, which is what we know of as the land of Israel. So Canaan became a curse by taking a land that wasn't his. So we're going to look at a map just to kind of show what this actually looks like, what it looked like when they actually divided the lands. So we can actually put, because we actually heard all those different, those different lands and names and things like that, right? So I know everybody on YouTube, you may not can see this. We'll see if we can put the map on YouTube for you to see. But here we can all see these lands. And looking at it, we can see that in Africa, it's got Ham there, but also Dedan on the other side of the Red Sea. And then we can see where it's got Canaan in a box, correct? On the screen here, because Canaan was not supposed to dwell in this land. Then we look over here, we got Shem, all these lands here. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. You can see the Ham's people got some of the southern part. That's where modern day Yemen is. Correct me, Brother Craig? Yemen and Qatar. I believe they're the southern point of Saudi Arabia. It's Yemen and Qatar, I remember. Or Qatar, as they call it. So Ham had all this here land. Shem had the other land, the middle of the earth. And then Japheth had all the European areas, or what we call the European areas. And some of this and everything gets down to what they call Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and all those things. Up here you got Turkey, and you got Romania, and Czech Republic on this side, and Georgia, the country of Georgia. So we can see that this is the map of what actually took place. And then, when we look there, the people of Canaan, we had all these different nations and people that came from him, like the Arvadites, the Zemarites, the Archites, the Sinites, the Sidonians, which we get the city of Sidon from, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, which lived in a part of Israel called Jebus, which was later changed to Jerusalem, and then the Girgashites. So Canaan took a land which did not belong to him there, as we see on the map. And then we can see on the map too, Kittim, and all these different sons of Javan. Here, the southern part of Turkey. This is Turkey right there, the southern part of it. And over here you have Greece and different ones over there, Italy, Greece, as it goes on over further over here, Tarshish, and all those things there. So this is the map, though, when you see how they actually divided the lands. So all those little theories that they talk about as far as the curse of Canaan had nothing to do with people or their skin color being changed or any of that. It was simply about Ham doing something that was not correct, that he knew better to, because the thing is that obviously it was something that Ham knew better than to do, but he didn't do, because his brothers actually did what was right. And then Canaan himself brought a curse on himself, doubly brought a curse on himself for actually not doing what he's supposed to do. And what was the first curse, the punishment of it? He was going to be a servant of servants to Shem and even Japheth. When you read it thoroughly, he was to be a servant to Ham's brothers. A servant of servants shall Canaan be. And that's the thing that people take it and will say this lie and say, well, hey, yeah, that's why black people were slaves, because they from the seed of Canaan. But no, that's actually not the case. But we're going to get a little more information here. So let's go to the book of Jasher now. Chapter 13. It's the book of Jasher. Bear with me just a moment there while I bring it up. Just a moment, everybody. Because remember, Canaan actually settled in a land that was not his, that belonged to Shem. So then when we get down to Abraham, things start to make sense. So in Jasher chapter 13, I'm just going to read verse 7. It says, "And the Most High appeared unto Abram when he came to the land of Canaan, and said to him, This is the land which I gave unto thee and to thy seed after thee forever. And I will make thee thy seed like the stars of heaven. I will give unto thy seed for an inheritance all the lands which thou seest." So when the Most High said that to Abraham, that was literal, wasn't it? Because Abraham was a son of Shem. So he's telling Abraham, look, this land I'm going to give you is land that already belongs to you and your seed. But he gave, of course, that land specifically to Abraham out of Shem's seed, because, of course, we know Shem has other children also, like the Assyrians and different ones. I believe when you do the history on the Iranians, they're part Shem and then part Japhet, because you had the son of Japhet named Madai that came in and merged with the actual Medes. And the Medes came from Shem, Madai came from Japhet. So that's why when you talk about Iranians, for example, they call them Indo-Europeans. So do they call India as well, because those people are a mixture of both Japhet and Shem. I'm just saying that in case someone does not actually realize that. So the Most High told Abraham he was going to give him a land that already belonged to him. Let's go to Genesis chapter 17. It's the book of Genesis chapter 17. And basically, we're just going to recite the same thing that actually was said before in Jasher 13 and 7. So Genesis 17, 7 and 8, it says, and this is the Most High talking to Abraham again, "And I will establish my covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." So again, the Most High is citing a previous promise that he had already given to Abraham, that he's spoken of in Jasher chapter 13 and 7. Now, why am I reading this? Because here's the thing. When we start to look at this second curse that came upon Canaan, we're going to start to understand. When we put that in mind, we start to understand now why the Most High gave certain commandments to the Israelites. All right? For example, do we remember what the Most High told them to do when they were to go into the Promised Land? What did he tell the Israelites? He told them to drive out all the nations that were there. Why? Because there were nations of Canaanites who were not supposed to be there anyway. Again, bringing this right back to the second part, the second curse that was upon Canaan. His people settled in a land that didn't belong to them. The Most High told the Israelites, you drive them out and don't spare anybody. They were not supposed to be there. But of course, the Israelites didn't do that, did they?
They were supposed to carry out his judgment.
They were supposed to carry out his judgment, correct? What did the Israelites do instead? They made leagues with them. What did it say in Deuteronomy 7? Don't make a league with them. Don't give your daughter to them. Don't take their sons for your daughters. We were not supposed to intermingle with the Canaanites at all. Because why? The Canaanites were cursed doubly. First from Noah, and then for being in a land that was not theirs. But the Israelites didn't drive them out. So what does it say about that in Numbers? Let's go to the book of Numbers, chapter 33. That's the book of Numbers, chapter 33. We're going to read verses 50 through 56. That's Numbers 33, verse 50. And the Most High spake unto Moses in the plains of Moab by Jordan, near Jericho, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye are passed over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, and destroy all their pictures, and destroy all their molten images, and quite pluck down all their high places. And ye shall dispossess the inhabitants of the land, and dwell therein, for I have given you the land to possess it. See, when we read the Bible, sometimes we'll think, reading that ahead of time, we'll be like, man, that was unfair. Why did the Most High just kick people out? Well, that's because we don't know how all the story. The Most High is just. The Most High doesn't do things that are unfair. He does things justly and righteously. He kicked them out because they were accursed people that didn't belong there. 54. And ye shall divide the land by lot for an inheritance among your families, and to the more ye shall give the more inheritance, and to the fewer ye shall give the less inheritance. Every man's inheritance shall be in the place where his lot falleth. According to the tribes of your fathers ye shall inherit it. But 55. But if ye will not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, those Canaanites, those people that are doubly cursed, then it shall come to pass that those which ye let remain of them shall be pricks in your eyes, and thorns in your sides, and shall vex you in the land wherein you dwell. Moreover, it shall come to pass that I shall do unto you as I thought to do unto them. What was the lesson about last week? Before that, the consequences of disobedience? All we had to do, all our people had to do was just drive them out of the land. They didn't belong there. Let's go to the book of Judges, chapter 1. And I'm going to tell you, the book of Judges is an interesting read, because if you read the book of Judges, you actually read about all the conflicts that our people had with these Canaanites. You read about them over and over. How these Canaanites really, literally became thorns in our sides. So in Judges 1 and 28 it says, And it came to pass when Israel was strong, that they put the Canaanites to tribute, and did not utterly drive them out. It's kind of like King Saul, like we talked about before. He went to war, and he was fighting Canaanites. That's interesting, right? Same people. And the Most High told him, don't spare nobody. Man, woman, child, not even the cattle. The Most High told him, don't even take their cattle. Slaughter everybody and everything and destroy everything. Saul went there, spared some of them, took the best of the cattle, and he said, hey, I did what the word of the Most High was. No, you didn't. These were accursed people. So in 28, our people, this is before Saul, of course, they put them to tribute, but didn't utterly drive them out. And then when you go on through the book of Judges, you read how these people were a nuisance to the children of Israel. Skip over to Judges chapter 2. Let's read verses 1 through 3. And the angel of the Lord came up from Gilgal to Bochim, and said, I made you to go up out of Egypt, and have brought you into the land which I swore to you by your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And ye shall make no league with the inhabitants of this land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Why have ye done this? Wherefore I also said, I will not drive them out from before you, but they shall be as thorns in your sides, and their gods shall be a snare unto you. So again, these Canaanites were a people that were cursed. First, when Ham, the father of Canaan, didn't cover his father's nakedness, when he saw Noah drunk in his tent, in his tabernacle. Instead, he went and told his brothers Shem and Japheth, who then did the proper thing, which is take a covering and cover their father. Then, during the time of Peleg, you had the sons of Noah dividing the land secretly, and then they went and told their father Noah. And then Noah cast lots before them to decide which lands would fall to which ones. Of course, Shem, it says that Shem got the best part of the land. Now, it's interesting that it says Shem got the best of the land because most of the lands of Shem are what you would call desert. But it said temperature-wise that they had some hot and some cool was blended. Whereas Japhet went to all the cold areas, Ham went to all the hot areas. But then you had Canaan, already cursed, brought it worse on himself because he then wanted to get the land of, as it was called then, Lebanon, which was now called the land of Israel. And he decided to take that for his land instead, so he brought another curse upon himself. So now you have Canaan, who was doubly cursed. Again, it had nothing to do with skin color, has nothing to do with Africans being taken in slave ships or whatever, which they really were Hebrews, but that's another story. But it has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact of disobedience. From his father Ham's part first off, and then from his part, taking a land that didn't belong to him. The children of Israel were then told that they were to drive out the inhabitants of Canaan, because they were in a place that didn't belong to them. But of course, the children of Israel, disobedient as our people have always been, they put them to tribute at times, but then at other times when you read in the book of Judges, the Canaanites had them in subjection to them. So these people that were cursed were supposed to be wiped out. These things, though, are what make up the curse of Canaan. It has nothing to do with any racist doctrine or any type of emotion. This is all just facts based on what's in the scriptures. And one other point I want to make, a lot of people talk about the modern day Palestinians. And a lot of people believe that the Palestinians actually come from Canaan. But actually, when you look in Genesis chapter 10, it tells you that the Palestinians came from Mizraim's son, Casluhim. This is in verses 13 and 14. So the modern day Palestinians, who are in those areas called the Gaza Strip, Ashkelon, and all those different places, Goliath, for example, was a Philistine. Today they call them Palestinians, but you can see those are children of Ham, and you can see what they look like. And a lot of them look like actually black people in America. Some of them look like they're Arab and things like that. But they are also today in a land actually that didn't belong to them either. And we can see the result of what's happening, right? They're having all these problems. Even the so-called people that call themselves Jewish, Israel has the highest rate of skin cancer in the world because there are people that's in a land that's not theirs. Right. So we can see the correlation all back to Canaan. Everybody that goes to Israel that's not supposed to be there has got problems. And these problems are divine judgments that the Most High brings upon them because he says the people that actually the land belonged to are not in the land. And even that came about because when we were in the land, we were disobedient. But the Bible said that Israel shall be trodden by the Gentiles for a time and a half. It's interesting because when we actually look at all the scriptures, we never put it all together and understand that when is that time supposed to happen that it's trodden by the Gentiles? We're in that time right now. That's the reason why the land is filled with Gentiles. So, again, it was one of those things I wanted to visit this doctrine because it is a doctrine that, as far as the curse of Canaan, that's really got a lot of misnomers. I've even read, there's even something you can read in Strong's that was actually very surprising to me that you can read about Ham, where it's talking about, where it actually does mention something crazy, saying that by imprecation, because Canaan was cursed, that Ham became cursed and all his descendants. But the Bible never said Ham was cursed. It only said cursed be Canaan. So, it reminds us that when we're looking at the scriptures, when we rightly divide the word of truth, we can't do it according to emotion or some racist doctrine that we are attached to because of personal feelings. We got to make sure that we're actually looking at doctrine according to what the word actually says about it. So the curse of Canaan again was Ham being disobedient, not covering his father when his father was drunk, and Canaan taking advantage or seizing land that did not belong to him. That is what the curses of Canaan are about. Shabbat Shalom out there in YouTube land. Thank you for listening.